Hello, so today it's that time of the week to go over the best comms for the new patch that just launched today, 15.4. If you haven't been keeping up with the set, there was a lot of changes that happened leading to this new patch. Lots of things got reworked, lots of comms that used to be strong are now very weak, and other comms that were kind of strong are like eh. There was a lot of changes, some system changes as well. Before we get into the actual comms, make sure to like and subscribe. I do daily TFT content, so normally I'm doing these best comps on patch days and then the week after to kind of update them. If you didn't see the patch, I also did a patch review which you can check out on my channel that happened a couple days ago. Additionally, there is VOD channel if you want to see up-to-date games from the new patch. I'm going to start posting them as soon as I upload this video. So the way I normally do this video, I usually try and pick 3 non-reroll comps and 3 reroll comps that I think are the best recommendations for climbing. These are comps that I personally think that I would be playing mostly in my games based on a initial read of the patch and playing a couple games today, seeing how things kind of shaped out. Of course, there might be higher cap comps, there might be some other comps. These are ones I consider to be the most consistent and the ones that I recommend. So let's get straight into it. Number 1 for non-reroll, I would say, is the Mentor Ryze board. Now, this comp did receive quite a few little nerfs here and there. There were some adjustments to Senna, there were some nerfs to Ryze, there were some nerfs in general to just the way things kind of worked, like Socialite, but I still think this comp is performing really well, and I think it's generally one of the stronger, if not the strongest 4-cost comp that you can play around right now, barring anything new that we discover within the coming days. With this comp, it hinges on one main thing, or it hinges on a couple main things, but basically you're playing around 4 Mentor with Mighty Mech, so you get your mech in for free. I have a bunch of extra units here on the side. Please disregard these units. These are for like max cap and some other opportunities. Your main units are going to be these couple right over here. You're going to go for Mentor, you're going to go for Mighty Mech, you're going to try and fit in your Aatrox as he ties in the synergies of Juggernaut and Heavyweight for your Mentor units. This comp has a lot of frontline because you're basically playing Jarvan, Strategist to give to the Ryze, you have the Mighty Mech summon, and then all of the other Mentor units all provide like different utility and stuns, which is really nice. When you're playing around this comp, usually you're playing around Senna and Ryze carry, but you can easily play Yasuo instead of the Senna, and you can play around one of the high cap units, the 5-cost Yone or the 5-cost Lee Sin, usually Executioner Lee Sin, but you can basically play around either of these 2 units pretty easily with AD items. When you're building around your Ryze, Ryze loves to have AP. You want to give him as much base stats as possible because he has Executioner as a built-in trait, which means his ult will crit, so that scales up his damage in that way. And then he also has Strategist, which gives him damage amp, which scales his ult that way. The only thing that's missing from the Ryze is AP or base AP. So stuff like an Archangels will work really well. Archangels got like a little bit of a nerf, but I still think is really good on him as an item. You can even make a Shiv just to make him a little bit more efficient in terms of dealing some damage, chew through some of that magic resist. And then in some cases, even blue buff works really well. You technically don't need mana gen on the Ryze because his Mentor trait gives him some mana gen, but blue buff in particular works pretty well, and now it also gives additional attack damage and ability power, so I think it works really well, especially on the new patch. Additionally, you could even build towards more AP. You can't go wrong. More AP is often really good on this Ryze unit, so you can even go for like more Archangel, or you can go for more Rabadons. If you want to go for like a full crit build, it's a little bit less efficient because you're getting a lot of damage amp, but you can even go for like something like a Strikers. Anything like that. Your last item could be pretty flexible. This is a comp that does require or does like a lot of tiers, so a lot of times you're playing this from a spot of having a lot of tiers in order to itemize towards the Ryze. Senna, you can usually build either like crit, or you can build like similarly with some base stats. She does usually require a Shojin in order to get some of those ults off, so Shojin is usually what I would recommend, and then you can build her into like crit. Sometimes IE works really nicely because you can move it after onto units like the Yasuo if you play around Yasuo, or the Yone, or even Lee Sin. You're not usually playing deep into Executioner unless you like hit like a really high cap board, so you have lots of opportunities to like move around the IE, or just to have it on the unit because it still gives them good crit scaling. But either way, you can also just go for other glove items on the Senna, so something like, you know, a Strikers, or even like a utility item like a Last Whisper. When you're capping out this board, obviously you could go for Senna 3-star, Yasuo 3-star. I usually recommend going for these units if you're able to roll on 7 with one of the augments that supports playing around these low-cost mentors. So for example, there is Teacher's Council. This allows you to basically play less than 4 mentor. And still get the mentor bonuses and also give the mentor bonuses to your whole team. If I have an augment like this, I'm more inclined to play around Senna reroll, Yasuo reroll, because it's a little bit easier to play around that because you don't have to go level 8 for the Ryze. If I don't have an augment like this, maybe that's me being a little bit too critical, but I'm trying to play in a consistent and reliable way. At least that's the way that I approach the game. So I would usually not really go for Yasuo Senna. I think it's a little bit of a waste of gold unless you high roll them. Instead, I would then once hitting my board and stabilizing around Ryze 2, I would go for Yone, what's his name? Yone, Lee Sin. You can also play Volibear on this line because Yasuo, especially with even a 2-star, does pretty good damage. So Edgelord having active is pretty good, and Volibear 2-star can be pretty good. Or you can even play an Akali. These are for Executioners. These are for Edgelords. It really depends on how your items work out, but usually you can slot in any of these 4 units on your level 8 or level 9 board as your +1s. Now, there is something that's really important about this board. If you play this board and you have a certain power-up, it makes the board significantly stronger and significantly more stable. The power-up in question is it's called Socialite. Now, this one got nerfed as well. The whole comp got a little bit of nerfs here and there, but all in all, if you still have all the pieces that make the comp strong, I still think it's one of the best 4-cost comps and is pretty consistent and powerful on the current patch. But basically with Socialite, you mark adjacent hexes, and then you get additional damage amp and HP for your entire board. Because this board has a little bit of a sum of its parts quality and also has a lot of units that do a lot of work, your front line basically tanks a lot between all the mentors, and having them cast is really powerful, and the backline units and all the units in general can do a lot of damage as well. You really want to hit Socialite, and specifically you dig for it on Aatrox because it's really efficient and he's a 1-cost unit, so you can often get it on stage 3, and then you can buy, sell, and get Aatroxes until you get Socialite. Then with Socialite, basically what you're going to do is you're going to spread this Aatrox around. Usually you put them in one corner, other corner, make sure the back line has the Socialite hexes, and then front line, and then you just rotate them around because it works for 4 rounds basically. So you just want them in each of these 4 spots more or less. I'll remove some of these just so it's not as cluttered on the board. Socialite is extremely important. It's one of the most important things for this board. Without Socialite, the board feels extremely unstable and it feels a lot weaker. It is a huge difference even after the nerfs. I would say it's even more important after the nerfs because obviously in order for this board to make up for the nerfs that it had, you really want to have the best version of the board in order to have it as powerful as possible. So make sure that you dig for Socialite. You can also hit Socialite on both Udyr and Yasuo, so you have a lot of chances to try and like dig with the fruit. So you want to save all your power up fruits and dig for that Socialite, and usually try and use tricks like buying, selling, hold on to extra copies of Aatrox. That's a 1-cost unit, so it's pretty inexpensive. Make sure that you buy extras so that you don't have to use as many removers if possible. On the other units, you can take stuff like Sky Piercer on Senna or Ryze just to optimize your damage. This comp, you really want to have damage items. You don't want to be making tank items because you could just build damage item after damage after damage item, right? You can easily put damage items on Yasuo, Senna, Ryze, your 5 costs. Usually the only one that you might want to tank is Jarvan, but this is a comp that you really want to have as many damage items as possible. So don't prioritize tank with this comp in general because you're going to have enough frontline as is. Sometimes the Protector's Vow or mana items on Jarvan are really nice so you can get those stuns off. But that's a little crash course on Mentor. I talked about it in a couple videos in the past, but I think this is the most important of the 4-cost comps to play right now because a lot of the other 4-cost comps feel very situational or a little bit off-putting just because they got a lot of nerfs, like especially like the Yumi comps and some of the other more consistent 4-cost comps. Next, we're going to talk about the other 4-cost comp that I think is going to make up majority of your games if you're playing around like a fast 8 style of gameplay. That's going to be Soul Fighter. Soul Fighter didn't get much of a change besides the fact that Samira got buffed in that her single target damage is a lot higher. That's enough to make Soul Fighter actually playable and really good. Soul Fighter now is one of the best comps you can play around, and is one of the more reliable of the 4-cost comps to play. Because the main thing about Soul Fighter, it existed in previous patches as well. Soul Fighter is really strong early game. If you have Soul Fighter in, you're getting a lot of HP, a lot of AP, a lot of AD. It's a lot of value for what it is. So if you have a Soul Fighter opener, a lot of times on stage 2, stage 3, you were really strong. And the biggest problem last patch was that when you finally made it to Samira, it felt really weak, and then you just lost every round, starting with the Samira rounds. So that's the part with Soul Fighter that now got remedied, which makes it a much more consistent and strong comp. Playing around Nefiri early is extremely powerful. Playing around, like, you know, early game Lux and Callista can also be extremely powerful. But this board, like before, is a sum of its parts. It can also work really well with different reroll lines. You can also reroll Viego for a high cap variation of this, where you then itemize towards Viego. Viego with range is also extremely strong, but typically you're playing around Samira carry if you're playing it as a 4-cost comp. When you're playing Samira, items crit works really well because you have a lot of base stats, right? This is the complete opposite of Ryze, right? Soul Fighter gives a huge amount of base stats and true damage, so then you can just use a different means of scaling, so damage amp and crit works really nicely. So something like Infinity Edge will be really cool. Additionally, Samira has an effect where she kind of gets like her cast off, and she's tax style, and then her 4th cast is like a really big damage dealing move. So something like a Shojin works really well just to get those casts off, right? Get the engine going, make sure that she does a bunch of damage. Your last item is really flexible. Something that I'm going to mention throughout this video is Giant Slayer as an item. Giant Slayer got a little bit of a buff. I don't really like I always mentioned in the past, like when I would rank items, that Giant Slayer feels a little bit situational because there were other items that just gave more damage amp. For example, like a Strikers has less of a criteria, right? You would get more damage amp from it, right? 10 damage amp plus 5%. Up to 4 times, this would give 30 damage amp, and it would apply to any unit. Well, Giant Slayer now just got buffed, so now it gives 15 plus 15, and also gives 15 starting, and it gives a lot of base stats as well. So in general, Giant Slayer now is one of the better items to make, and it often finds its way on a lot of builds. So just keep that in mind. So, you know, as we update, or as I update while I talk about different things, Giant Slayer now is a really good item. So if you have the leftover components and you want to make a Giant Slayer, it's great, really good on the current patch. But you could also continue to go for a full crit build, right? Get those critical strike chances up with another glove item like a Strikers. You have a lot of flexibility. Even stuff like Gunblade can sometimes work well on Samira just to give your board a little bit more sustain. In terms of utility, you can also build a lot of utility on Gwen. So something like Morello works really well because Gwen's going to be your high cap unit. And then you could often build her either with like a crit build or like a utility build because she hits the whole board. So she's going to be great. In the meanwhile, you can often put items on Viego until you hit Gwen. Or you can put items on Lux because in both cases, Viego and Lux, are even at 2 stars, are going to do pretty good damage if you have extra damage items. Of course, on set, you just want to make them as tanky as possible. Just try and make as many good tank items, armor, MR, and HP. Just make like a Giga Tank of Doom so that he just lives forever, right? I'll just put these. It doesn't have to be exactly these items, but you know what I mean. Make the best tank items that you're capable of making at the time. But, you know, just lots of armor, lots of HP, as much as you can, right? Don't try and put too much utility on him because he's going to be mostly your front line. In terms of your other units, 8 Soul Fighter is super important. So obviously, if you hit Gwen or if you have an emblem to make it easier, both of those are amazing. 6 Soul Fighter just gives you so much HP and so much stats that it's just way worth it, more so than anything else. If you're playing less than 8 Soul Fighter in any of these Soul Fighter boards, it's usually a little bit of a grief, or you're playing something else, right? You're not playing specifically a Soul Fighter board. Instead, you're playing maybe more of an Edgelord board or a Luchador board or something else. But if Samira is your main carry and Set is your main tank, 8 Soul Fighter is usually the way to go. In terms of extra units you can play, Shen is a great low-cost unit that just gives you 2 synergies, right? You get your Edgelord for Samira, optimize her damage a little bit, and then you also get Bastion, which gives your whole team some extra armor. They all get a lot of HP because of Soul Fighter, so the armor goes a long way. So Shen is a good unit to hold on to if you want. Of course, you could cap your board higher. You can play Volibear, which obviously if you have melee-style items, you can make him a dual carry. And you can build him, you know, a lot of times it's like Kraken, BT +1, just like usually like tank melee. Drain tank kind of works pretty nice on him. But of course, he's not going to benefit from Soul Fighter, so sometimes it might be a little bit awkward to itemize the Volibear in this particular line. But obviously, you can also cap with the Braum, get the Bastion in, and then you also get Luchador in. So a couple of extra units that you can play there. But like I said, usually 8 Soul Fighter, and then you tack on somebody to try and tie the board together. If you have the melee items, go for the Volibear. He has many flexible builds as well. You can also put an IE on him here, like an Infinity Edge, make him crit. You have lots of options. And then obviously Braum, high cap potential for later in the game. Lastly, I really struggle to find another 4-cost comp, by the way. I want to make it very clear. The 4-cost right now, at least on the day 1 of the patch, it feels very awkward and temperamental. It feels like if you have an insanely good spot for a comp, it kind of works out. But for the most part, it just feels like rerolls are becoming way more dominant on the current patch. And I think it's just because of the way everything kind of got nerfed, but a lot of the rerolls kind of stayed in a similar ambiance of like being available. It's kind of like feels like a little bit awkward. The comp that I would put as my number 3 is Star Guardian. I still think this comp, it got a heavy rework. So basically all of the Star Guardian bonuses got increased, but the Star Guardian trait itself, like how much scaling you get for playing more Star Guardian units, got decreased. So it's hard to say exactly where it ended out. Like if you try and math it out, it feels like an overall nerf. But it's, like I said, it's hard to say because it really depends on like what you hit and how early you hit. But I still think this board is pretty consistent. From what I've seen, it's performing pretty well as well. And I think it could be one of the comps that you can still play on the current patch. Another option is Yuumi, but I think Yuumi, Yuumi in some of the games I played today is performing well, but in the stats seems pretty bad. We'll talk about Yuumi a little bit later, but I think it's really reliant now on the Wraith buffs and playing around Malzahar a lot more into that line and itemizing Malzahar rather than tank and having Yuumi clutch up. So we'll talk about that a little bit later though, because I want to do a whole little Wraith section when we get to reroll. But anyways, going back to Star Guardian, usually you're playing around Jinx. Jinx has a lot of she gets a lot of attack speed from her passive, and she does an insane amount of damage from her active. So a lot of times, what you want to do is build her towards AD. Crit obviously works well. It has great synergies with her kit, because obviously you want to crit because she does a huge amount of damage, but also critical strikes give her more attack speed. So it actually just works really great to just have her as a crit build. So IE, great. Next item is usually going to be something like a Kraken's, just to give her some base stats, right? You want to have a lot of base stats, so then when you crit, you do a shit ton of damage. Obviously, makes sense. And then Giant Slayer is really good, so Giant Slayer is a good option. A lot of people build Gwynsu. I think that it's a waste of an item. I think that she has enough attack speed with her kit as is, so I would prefer a 3rd damage item here. Obviously, a full crit build could work really well with her, because she obviously has really good scaling with crit as well, because her ability has a passive that, you know, additionally gives her attack speed because of crits. But Giant Slayer is just really good item right now, help you chew through some of those front lines and gives a lot of stats and damage amps. So Giant Slayer could be a great 3rd option there. Additionally, when you're trying to itemize, you usually itemize towards Seraphine after. Seraphine, Archangel is really strong. Obviously, you can give her some of the utility items, but usually the utility items you might want to put on like a Xayah or an Ahri or somebody else, just because Seraphine takes a while to cast. But usually it can work out pretty well. When you're talking about power-ups with this comp, usually I go for something like Sky Piercer on Jinx, just because this comp does a lot of AP damage. Xayah's bonus for Star Guardian means that all auto attacks do AP damage, and most of the other units are AP damage dealers. So it makes a lot of sense to play this from a spot where you have Sky Piercer on the Jinx. You don't have to worry about making Shredder Sunder, and instead you optimize your damage for shredding and sundering, reducing armor and magic resist, so your whole board does a lot of damage. Poppy has a lot of options for fruits and stuff. Obviously, I think with her newer build, she shields a little bit better, so you might want to build her more tanky and HP. In the past, she was like really good with like Sterix. I still think that might be pretty good on her, but of course, just build her as a proper tank, make sure that she doesn't die, and slot in the Kabuko for heavyweight. Additionally, the comp still spikes really hard with 9 Star Guardian on level 9, so if you have a Star Guardian emblem, obviously you can play towards that as an option. Anyways, those were the non-reroll comps. Like I said, the Mentor Ryze and the Soul Fighter boards, I think, are going to be the more common ones that you're going to aim for if you're trying to play around 4 costs. A lot of the other lines I didn't mention, like obviously there's still Yuumi that exists in certain spots. There's still like, you know, a lot of the comps on the previous patches. However, I think that those 2 that I'm talking about now are the ones that are like, they actually seem pretty good on the patch, and the other ones feel very situational or more temperamental. Either way, let's go into the reroll comps. So the first reroll that I want to talk about, this is one that I didn't really talk about last patch, but it did exist last patch pretty effectively. This is Xayah. So with Xayah, there's a lot of little moving parts, but typically you're playing Xayah with protectors, and then you slot in a Yasuo for the edgelord synergy. Before in the past, Xayah used to be played with bastions. However, they buffed and made it a lot easier to hit fan service. So with Xayah, you're almost always trying to hit fan service. So fan service, you get extra stats and bonus stats based on star level. So Rakan and Xayah will become extremely powerful as a frontline and a backline carry if you hit fan service. The other thing that they changed about fan service is that if you hit fan service on one unit, you are guaranteed to hit it on the other unit. So if you hit fan service on Xayah, when you fruit Rakan, it will offer fan service. It makes it very easy and very coherent to actually hit the full trait. So you don't even have to worry about it that much. It's not like, oh, how do I hit 2 fan service? It's like, well, you just have to hit 1 fan service and then you're guaranteed the other one. So this is what you usually go for. The comp got nerfed a little bit because protectors got nerfed, but Star Guardian's nerfs, or the changes to Star Guardian, I think favor comps like this where you're playing around lower levels of Star Guardian, because the bonuses themselves got really high, but the Star Guardian scaling for playing multiple Star Guardian got lower. So if you're only playing 2 or 3 Star Guardian, it actually makes it pretty strong. So I think this comp overall is one of the best, if not the best reroll to play around right now. Basically with Xayah, you want to build it with a Guinsoo and a Kraken. Kraken got reworked, by the way, so we kind of didn't talk about it. That's why I'm not really mentioning Ashe that much, because I feel like it's a little bit more awkward around that type of line. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels a little bit weirder, because Kraken now has like a max cap, and then it just gives a bunch of attack speed. But Xayah does have good scaling with attack speed, so it's okay. So typically like Guinsoo Kraken and then +1. Good item on the current patch right now, Giant Slayer. So I think this would be like a good build for Xayah that I would be pretty happy with. You don't really care too much about crit on Xayah. Crit on Xayah typically isn't that great, so typically you're just going for like an AD damage amp build. It mostly is because the way that she attacks, she's mostly an auto attacker, so most of her damage is just doing auto attacks, which already can crit, so you don't need like the IE to make her ult crit, because her ult is just like, you know, you do more damage by auto attacking, just auto attack. So you just want a lot of AD and a lot of damage amp, and it usually works out to be a little bit better. Rakan items are very weird. So Rakan, in the stats, at first it looked like a meme build, but I'll explain it because I also looked in the stats and it says that it's good in the stats. A lot of times on Rakan, you really like to have Archangels. So the thing about Rakan is that you're going to have so much stats from fan service. Like, you're going to have so much tankiness from fan service. And with 6 Protector, this Rakan is basically not going to die. So with Archangels will scale him as the fight goes on. Obviously, you can gain AP. With his AP, he's going to heal himself and the 2 lowest percent allies. The lowest percent allies is with potential, excuse me. He's going to heal and deal damage. So that's the main thing, right? The healing basically makes this Rakan unkillable with an Archangels. So Archangels works really nicely on the Rakan for sure. Excuse the other healing. The healing of the allies I don't think applies in this particular build. But Archangels works really well on him. Additionally, something like a Titans is also something people go for on him. The Titans, I think, is a little bit more of a meme, but it also says that it's good in the stats, so I don't know if it's just a bias of lots of people playing the comp with the particular set of items that is recommended in stats and stuff. But Titans also says it's really good because for a similar reason, he stacks the AD and AP and gets the armor and MR from it pretty easily, so it just works out really nicely. And then usually to fill up the gap, it's like a tank item, usually Gargoyle. This is what people consider to be like Rakan best items for this comp. I think I'm a little skeptical about Titans personally. I think Archangels, Gargoyle, and then another tank item is probably going to be better. But of course, the Titans does ramp up. It does scale because he's going to live forever anyways. And then it also scales his ult a little bit and it works. But this is the one I wouldn't prioritize, right? I would go for these 2 items first, and then I would make Titans if I have those components left over, because the stats, like, it still says that it's good. So I have to trust the numbers. But my own intuition says this one's the useless item. So, you know, trust me or trust the numbers. I don't know. I'll just tell you guys what everybody else is saying so that we're all on the same page. Like, you know, maybe there's something I'm missing, of course. With this comp as well, I think that the best spots for this comp are with certain augments. Obviously, I mentioned it before, but Tiny Team is extremely good. right? When you field a lower amount of Star Guardians, you get increased bonuses. This works extremely well for this comp because you're not playing that many Star Guardians anyways, and what this is going to do, it's going to scale you to have way more shielding because of the Nico, which helps out everybody, and then you're also going to have way more damage on the Xayah because the Xayah bonus is doing the extra AP per auto attack. So Xayah in particular, she is a unit that just constantly auto attacks, so getting her Star Guardian bonus, it works really well with her. Scaling that is going to mean that she's going to do significantly more damage. She's going to do a shit ton of AP bonus damage with her auto attacks. So something like Tiny Team, really good. The other augment that's really good, this is the one that I think is like the broken tech, if you've seen it, is Double Trouble. Double Trouble, when you field 2 copies of a champion's, they both gain 33 attack damage, 33 ability power, armor, magic resist, and then when you're 3-star, you get a 2-star copy. So the idea is that you're playing 2 copies of the same unit, and those units become giga juiced, and they're really strong, and they get a bunch of extra stats. Now, it doesn't look like it's a lot, but for a gold augment, this is a lot of stats. This is like borderline prismatic level amounts of stats. It is huge, but it just requires you to play 2 copies of the unit. So it's very situational between the comps that actually can make use of it. This one works out pretty well because from 6 Protector to 4 Protector, the Rakan is still going to be unkillable. So typically what you do with this setup is that you play double Rakan, double Xayah, and then you just play the Edgelord, you play the Yasuo, and then you just play 4 Protector. So your setup looks a little bit like this, and it's extremely strong. This is one of the best setups for the comp. Same items, same build as this. You're basically just dropping 2 protectors, which are these 1-cost versions of the protectors. You're getting less protector bonus, but as compensation, you're getting a bunch more damage on the Xayah because you're giving yourself a bunch of AD and AP, both of which are really good for scaling because she has AP and AD scaling. And then you're getting a bunch of armor and MR on the Rakan as compensation, so it's equally as tanky, if not tankier, but you also do more damage with the Xayah. That's part of the reason why you can afford to drop the 2 protectors, play 4 protector, and be equally as strong. Additionally, the additional Xayah and additional Rakan will also get the double trouble bonuses. You basically, you're like, not only is your main Rakan, if this is your 3-star, going to be really strong, you're going to have a 2-star copy that's also going to be a fairly reliable and strong tank, and similarly with the Xayah. And a lot of times when you're playing these builds, you can itemize the 2nd copy of Xayah and the 2nd copy of Rakan, or if you have some TGs, you can just shove it on them because they're going to be pretty reliable and strong units. Next, let's talk about the other reroll comps. One comp that kind of skated by a little bit is Xayah. Xayah did get a little bit of a nerf, but I still think Xayah is very strong, obviously because of her scaling. We talk a lot about Xayah on this channel, and I did do a lot of guides on Xayah. So if you want, just check out the how to play guides, and there is one of these that is a how to play Supreme Cell, right over here. You can check out this one and it will go over the Xayah comp in general. So I'm just going to try and give the spark notes for it right now. Usually if you can afford to, you hit the Rammus. Rammus scales infinitely as a frontline unit. So you have infinite scaling frontline, infinite scaling backline. With Xayah, what works really well is crit, obviously, because she has base AD, because she scales her AD permanently by getting kills. You have damage amp from Supreme Cells, and you have attack speed from Duelist. So what do you want? You want crit because you have all of the other stats taken care of. A lot of times with this IE, strikers could be a really good pairing. Also, a Giant Slayer could be a great option now because it's a very strong item. Additionally, if you want to be more consistent, you can swap in a Shojin with the IE just to make it so that the Xayah gets a significant amount of cast off. It helps her to do to be like capable in a lot of the fights, right? This is like the more consistent build. In high cap, if you have enough frontline to support the Xayah, you can go for triple damage and replace the Shojin, but in most cases, making a Shojin is going to be a very reliable and good option for your Xayah. When you're playing this, you almost always play for Supreme Cell, and in that case, you often go for Darius 3-star as well, and he becomes a dual carry. With Darius, you also go for a crit build, which looks something like this, and then of course, your third item, very flexible, if possible, Giant Slayer, because it's a really good item right now. With this comp, this is the Rammus version. If you don't hit Rammus, Mentor is a great alternative where you play around Kabuko as a frontline. You play for Mentor. This one's a little bit more awkward, obviously, because you need to hit the Ryze, and you have to be level 7. Sorry, this one you can fit in on level 7. This one you have to be level 8 to fit in for Mentor for Supreme Cell. So it's a little bit more high rolly, but it also caps equally as high. Additionally, you can also just play Xayah with Juggernaut A lot of times that's like a option that used to be with like Mundo, but this one is falling off a little bit. I don't think it's particularly strong, but usually you would play 4 Juggernaut, and then 4 Supreme Cell. That looks kind of like this. Of course, like this is another viable option that you can go for. And then you go for Mundo 3-star. You can also play 6 Juggernaut, but usually with 4 Supreme Cell, you just get more value because it gives so much extra damage amp that it's always worthwhile. Additionally, one comp that is extremely strong right now, related to this line, is the heavyweight Darius variation of Supreme Cell. So in this case, you're building Darius as your main carry, and a lot of times you go for Darius 3, Jace 3, and Smolder 3. The big thing about this comp is that you usually want to hit a particular power-up. This is one of those specific ones. With this one, you go for, excuse me, let me just type it out, Fusion Dance. So Fusion Dance, you fuse with the nearest neighbor, gaining their health, attack damage, and ability power. So this comp recently got buffed because Heavyweight got buffed, such that it's giving you more HP, which then also equates to more AD. Because the Darius is going to have a lot of AD and a lot of damage amp, guess what we're doing, chat? We're making a crit build, because you take crit, you pair it with the damage amp, you pair it with the base stats that he's getting from Heavyweight. You're good to go. And basically what you do is you build as much AD on this Jace, or like HP, like you just give him juicy stats that you're gonna grab with Fusion Dance, and then you Fusion Dance Jace 3 into the Darius, and this guy becomes a demon that he's unkillable and just one-shots and kills everything. You can also go for Smolder. I've seen people roll Smolder at the same time because it's efficient on level 8. I've also seen, on level 7. I've also seen people go for Xayah 3 as a dual carry in a similar vein, but typically you're going for 6 Heavyweight. These are like bonus, right? These are like icing on top of the cake that you can kind of play around. You really want to hit the Darius and the Jace. That's like the key synergy. And then Fusion Dance, boop, and like get the Darius to pop off. Make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. This comp, before this was like the worst version of the Xayah reroll comps and the worst version of playing Supreme Cell, but now this line is very good. It's like almost equally as good. So if you have a really good Darius spot, you can play Darius instead. If you have a really good Xayah spot, you can play Xayah and go for one of the Xayah variations. Lastly, last reroll comp that I want to talk about, the Sniper Jhin comp. So Sniper Jhin, there's a couple moving parts to this now. Malphite got a lot of nerfs, but I think this comp is still a really consistent and solid option to play around Jhin. Basically what you do is you go for Malphite 3-star. Malphite scales really well with armor, so armor items work really nicely, especially if you have like an early option to make like a Bramble Vest or anything like that. But a lot of times you're building him kind of like a Giga Tank, as a solo frontline option that also does a shit ton of damage that can stabilize you early game. So something like this is usually what you go for. With Jhin, with this comp, you're typically going to roll for Malphite 3, Sivir 3, but your main carry is going to be Jhin. So you're basically playing this kind of like a crew reroll, but you're just going to be playing 2 crew to get the bonus XP per roll and the free shop rerolls every round, which effectively just helps you to hit Jhin and helps you to cap your board really high, because then you can push levels as you're rolling. So usually you roll this on level 3/4. You usually roll this on level 4, excuse me. Treat it like a 1-cost reroll. Go for Malphite 3 or Sivir 3 and collect Jhins along the way. Once you have these, your rolls become really efficient. So then you just roll, you continue rolling level 4, level 5 until you reach level 6. Then you roll on level 6 until you hit Jhin. And then at that point, you can push levels to cap out your board with the other units. You can also go for Gnar 3. It also works in the comp because it's efficient. And Kennen 3. You just 3-star everybody because they're all pretty inexpensive. This is like the preferred way to usually play around these like crew units or crew line, just because this board can cap equally as high if you can hit Varus. And it also is way more consistent and way more reliable in the early game. For Jhin, there's a couple things. Obviously, Jhin, he has a passive where he basically locks his attack speed. With that, he does a bunch of insane damage, and his 4th attack does like a huge burst. So he has like the 1, 2, 3, and then 4 does a huge amount of burst damage. For Jhin, you can build him in different ways. So there are 2 main power-ups that you go for, and I don't know which one is better. This is still something I'm trying to figure out. I talk about it all the time, but I think that different schools of thoughts, they like, oh sorry, I'm on the power-up section. Different schools of thoughts like different versions of it, but basically you have Spirit Sword. Spirit Sword is basically like you get a bunch of extra crit chance, and then abilities that critically strike, you gain bonus magic. They do bonus magic damage. This makes Jhin do an insane amount of damage, because not only does he do his base damage that's really high, he also does an insane amount of bonus magic damage. So this build on Jhin, a lot of times you'll see people build it with like a crit build on him. So you'll see like, you know, like the classic like IE strikers. In general, this build, and then like, you know, last item, you don't really need to build attack speed on him, even though it scales his attack speed infinitely. It's like okay, it's not as good as just giving him another damage item. Like, you know, you don't really need to put like a Guinsu on him. It's just too slow, and it doesn't like it doesn't benefit him as much. But you can do something like this, just a lot of damage amp, a lot of crit, and just make sure that he hits like a truck. Of course, Deathblade works really well on him. He already has the damage amp from Sniper, so Deathblade in these cases gives him the base stats that he really wants to hit those juicy ults. Personally, he can crit like a lot of his damage is auto attacks, right? And his fourth attack, it's like basically crits anyways. So IE is kind of like a weird item where it doesn't really, like, it's not that good on Jhin. I talk about this a lot in previous videos, and there's always somebody that's like, like wah, like whatever. It's like, it's good. Like, you could put it on him and it's fine. But typically, like, you could just build like this, like strikers, Deathblade, and you could just stack like more AD or more damage amp, and he's still gonna crit. So it's still gonna be fine. It just might be a little bit less consistent, specifically with the spirit, what's it called? The spirit sword build. It might be a little bit less consistent, but in most cases, you're gonna be fine. And the other thing is that usually, like, you know, there's other people that still like artistic KO more. This one, every fourth attack, you do extra bonus damage, and then overkill bounces. This one, you usually want to just have more base stats because you're trying to overkill, and it just helps out a lot more in that regard, because your fourth attack is going to crit anyways. So you might as well just, like, use the artistic KO stats to, like, do better. So obviously, it comes from two schools of thought. Some people like artistic KO more because the overkill means that you're not wasting any damage, which is pretty good. A lot of times, like, the Jhin is gonna one-tap units anyways, or it's gonna, like, finish off a unit pretty effectively anyways. This overkill not wasting the damage is usually more efficient than something like Spirit Sword. However, Spirit Sword also just does so much extra damage that it's just worthwhile, because it's not on every fourth attack that you get, like, the bonus damage, like artistic KO. It's every attack you're doing 40% bonus damage. So this can chew through units a lot more efficiently and do a lot better. So you have two different options. Basically, whichever one you hit, you just take, and you're just happy with it. You know, you don't fucking worry about it, right? Like, that's what my advice would be. Because, like, if I see Spirit Sword, I'm not gonna re-roll it for artistic KO. If I see artistic KO, I'm not gonna re-roll it for Spirit Sword, because if I did neither of them on my Jhin, I'm in a way worse spot. So, you know, the only part that's weird is if you see both of them. In that case, if you have more crit items, I would go Spirit Sword. If you have less crit items, I would go artistic KO. That would be my breakdown of how to approach the comp, and I think that would give you the most success playing this comp. But anyways, really reliable, really awesome, and of course, if you hit the Varus, you're in a really good spot. One thing now, this is the amendment end of video, like little talk that I'm gonna have with you guys. So I'll put it as a separate section in the timestamps, but I'm gonna be for real with everybody. I don't know how broken Wraith is right now, because I personally think Wraith is really broken, but I'm going around and I'm not seeing a lot of people spamming Wraith. So I don't know if I'm just stupid, or if I figured it out, or if, like, it's gonna figure itself out in a bit. But I think Wraith right now is really broken, to a point where if I'm trying to optimize this board, I would probably go for 4 Wraith over playing the 5 Sniper, because I think that it's really broken. So, like, you know, I would just put in any extra Wraith unit and kind of play around that. I think Wraith is so strong right now that I think all the Wraith reroll lines are particularly potent, and I've been getting railed by it all day. So, like, every single game I'm playing, whenever there's a Wraith player, they're just like, they're just top 4. Like, there's just no hope. Basically what happened with Wraith is that they changed it from every 5 seconds to do the Shadow Realm Strike to every 4 seconds to do the Shadow Realm Strike. And that might not seem like a lot. It's like, oh, boo-hoo, it's 1 extra second, or it's 1 earlier second. Who cares? Let's be, like, mathematical about it. Basically, the Wraith damage heals and does extra damage. The Wraith trait effectively got a 20% damage boost, because if you go from 5 seconds to 4 seconds, you're getting... That's 20% of the time more, right? Like 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 12, you're getting 3 Wraith procs, versus 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, you're getting 2 Wraith procs. it's like a 20% increase, right? More or less. Like, obviously, you could break it down like, oh, the fight, RNG, and blah, 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 whatever. It snipes backlines all the time. You just one-tap units. It's insane. So all the lines that use Wraith, I think, are totally back and totally playable. I think Kayle Reroll is really strong right now. If you can make it to level 9, and I would play Kayle Reroll and then play 6 Wraith. If you're playing Kayle Reroll, it would be along the lines of, like, you build her like this, and then obviously Giant Slayer is really good, so you put their third item Giant Slayer. You go Crit and Guinsoo. I think Malzahar is really broken. I've seen Malzahar Reroll do really well, and the stats also say he's really good. I think a lot of the Yuumi boards that use Malzahar, they actually do really well if you hit Malzahar 3 with items. So Malzahar is usually like Morello, and then like sometimes Crit, and then other utility. Malzahar got a lot of buffs, by the way. He got the Wraith buff, obviously, which increases the damage. He also got a mana buff from 35 to 30. So even though Prodigy got a little bit nerfed, it didn't get nerfed for actual Prodigy units. So Malzahar actually pumps out damage like crazy, because his casts being more frequent means that he gets the infection that he does on more units, which optimizes damage significantly. So it's a very noticeably stronger Malzahar right now on the current patch. So Malzahar reroll, a lot of times you play it with Rammus as well. So if you have a Rammus start, you can also play Malzahar reroll. You play Rammus, Malzahar, you go Rammus 3, Malzahar 3, roll on level 7, then you fit in all the Wraiths and you fit in all the Prodigies. Jhin reroll, obviously, we just talked about. Fast 9 Varus, similarly, I think caps really high around either 4 or 6 Wraith. I don't know where the breaker point is, because usually you just play 6 if you don't have all the 5 costs, and then you can drop down to 4 if you have a bunch of 5 costs. But all of these lines, I think, are pretty strong. I'm going to make you guys a promise. Basically, I'm going to do a how to play Wraith guide in 1 or 2 days. Basically, tomorrow, I think I'm going to try and do the item guide. If not, at the earliest time I can, I'll do a how to play Wraith guide. I'll break down all this Wraith stuff in the Wraith guide, and it will give me a little bit of time to see how things are settling on the current patch, because I don't want to bait you guys. I don't want to put in the slide and say, this broken Kayle and Malzahar comp is going to make you guys gain. It's like, I don't want to bait you guys. So I think all the comps I said ahead of this is way more consistent and reliable. Wraith, I think I need to figure it out for myself over the next day or so, because it's a little bit of a newer thing. That's not something I can tie back to like previous patches. It's something that I'm just like kind of noticing on the current patch, which might just get sussed out, right? The day 1 of the patch, day 2 of the patch, everybody's experimenting, so you don't actually know if these like newer comps are broken or if they're just kind of like punishing people that don't know what's going on type of beat. You know what I mean? So I'm going to make a how to play Wraith guide, and I'll update you guys in a day or 2. So don't worry about it. If it's broken, I'll let you guys know if it's really broken. You guys can try it out on your own time if you really want to. But I don't recommend it as much as the other stuff. Deal? Thumbs up all around. I think that's the fairest way of doing that, just so I don't clickbait you guys. But anyways, of the comps, like I said, I think reroll in general is pretty good. A lot of the other reroll lines that existed are still good on the current patch. I think that if you have a reroll angle, you should definitely aim for it, because a lot of the 4-cost comps are less consistent based on like some of the adjustments and nerfs and general reworks that happened around it. So be careful out there. Of course, if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was fun and enjoyable, and hopefully it helps you to do a little bit better on the current patch, or to climb to whatever rank you want to climb to. Of course, next week we'll also do an updated version of this, so as things get sorted out, don't worry, I'll keep you guys up to date. So make sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. See ya. Bye-bye.